Okay, I've already done some of the formalities. This crowd's tired of me, and I'm going to get off the stage in just a moment. But let me once again welcome all of you to the Kennedy School in behalf of the Institute of Politics and all of us here that bring these events to you. We are very, very excited about tonight's events. You know, sometimes in the course of human endeavors, events and people intersect, many times causing a collision of colossal magnitude, such as it was November 2000, when from the galaxies above the sun, the moon, and the stars aligned themselves to set off a horrific explosion which occurred in the state of Florida and reverberated around this earth. Hello, world. Meet Katherine Harris, the Florida Secretary of State, who vaulted from relative obscurity to become an almost overnight household name and face on the American political scene. Secretary of State Harris excited the passions of Republicans and Democrats alike, both ends of the political spectrum with different and passionate views as to her intent and purposes. We're fortunate tonight that she would join us in the forum. She's one of us. She's a graduate of the Kennedy School. And she realizes that the forum is a place to exchange ideas, to examine opposing beliefs, and to carry out the spirit of free speech in a representative democracy. And tonight there could be no better person to introduce our speaker than a wonderful friend of ours, the executive dean here at the Kennedy School since 2000, Dean Bonnie Newman. Bonnie Newman served as the assistant to President and for Management and Administration under George Herbert Walker Bush, number 41. She also helped to oversee presidential transition in the personnel area during the Reagan-Bush 1988, as well as serving as Assistant Secretary of Commerce in the Reagan administration. Dean Newman also has strong political connections to the first in the nation primary state of New Hampshire, having served as Chief of Staff to then Congressman and now Senator Judd Gregg. It is my great pleasure to present to you Dean Bonnie Newman. Bonnie.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Pryor. You can tell that the Senator had a nice long winter vacation, and certainly that introduction of the Secretary bespeaks of all of the rest that you got, David. You're really in great form. And I now understand how and why the people of Arkansas saw fit to elect the Senator on so many different occasions. I'm delighted to be here this evening and to welcome you to the Kennedy School of Government and its Institute of Politics. As many in the audience know, often on this stage in the forum, we have the privilege of hosting the world's foremost political figures, those who by their willingness to serve shape the political landscape of their countries. Many who have chosen the noble path of public service, a path that we promote aggressively here at the Kennedy School, do so despite its often challenging nature. Tonight's guest has certainly made a name for herself since graduating from the Kennedy School's mid-career program in 1997, and will most certainly be remembered in the history books as an important and pivotal player in the Florida election recount of the 2000 presidential campaign. Elected Florida's Secretary of State in November of 1998, tonight's guest has the task of coordinating not only the administrative services of her state, but also its international affairs and cultural entities. As a state senator, a position she held for 4 years prior to her election as Secretary of State, Katherine Harris chaired the Commerce and Economic Development Committees. With a background in marketing and real estate, Secretary Harris has used her knowledge to help promote all that Florida has to offer the international community, while also encouraging economic development at home. Yet it was another job responsibility that brought this fourth-generation Floridian worldwide attention. As the chief overseer of elections for the state of Florida, Catherine Harris became a household name throughout not only Florida, but also the United States and beyond, for the role that she played in the Florida recount. Today, she continues her role as the state's top election official and is assisting local municipalities in modernizing their voting machines so that Chads, dimples, and butterfly ballots become a matter of history. Despite tremendous challenges, public and press scrutiny, Catherine Harris's star has seemed to grow, particularly in the state of Florida. Currently, she is considering running for the United States Congress in order to represent the interests of the citizens of Southwest Florida. Before introducing tonight's speaker, I would like to make a note to you, the audience. As Secretary Harris knows from her days at the Kennedy School, many of us here at the school are not shy and have strong feelings about the political process. I know that all of you will follow the great forum tradition of introducing yourselves when addressing questions to Secretary Harris and affording her a warm Kennedy School welcome.
Good evening. Dean Newman, thank you for your kind introduction. And I can't tell you how nostalgic it is just looking around the walls and seeing you all there and remembering the third floor and the countless nights I spent up there studying, to return to some of the most extraordinary memories that I had in my educational growth. Definitely nostalgic, and so thank you so very much. I'm honored to join the list of eminent activists and thinkers and leaders who have been here and addressed you in the forum of public affairs. And no doubt, perhaps for many of you, I've also been on your list for some time now. And I have to tell you that the notoriety truly is amazing and sometimes daunting. We have in Florida one of the most open forms of government in the sunshine. If we're to talk to our fellow cabinet members, we must do so if it concerns a vote publicly. And recently we received the newly constructed parliament from Mongolia. I, having grown up in a very small town in central Florida called Bartow, we received the parliament at cabinet, and after the photographs they turned to me and they said, "We know you, CNN." And so you cannot begin to imagine how extraordinary that really was. So I'm not really accustomed to that, although you might be surprised to know that during the recount I only actually appeared 4 times. Notwithstanding the fact that I understand Saturday Night Live aired me 6 weeks in a row, and probably every single other talk show host. And one day, I'm with my husband and Larry King calls, and he wants to know if I'll come on his show. And only as I can say, 4.5 years ago, I was sitting in your seat and trying to dream about what I would be, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But he called and he said, "Would you consider coming on our show and talking about the recount?" And I've never been one to be in the spotlight, never even had a communications director really focused on press conferences, seldom wrote press releases. And actually, I said, "No, Larry, I can't go on your show." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Didn't you see David Letterman last night?" This is a true story. And he said, "No, what did he say?" And I said, "Well, David Letterman said that I was in the middle of my 15 minutes of fame. The first phase was the character annihilation from the media. The second phase, I would get a beauty makeover, which I'm still waiting for until I learn how to apply my makeup properly. I'm not going to do your show." And the men had more makeup than I did on TV. I want you to know, though, way more. And the third phase, he said I was going to pose nude in Playboy. And the fourth phase, he said I was going to become the 5th Mrs. Larry King. So I said, "Larry, my husband won't let me go on your show." But I did, and he was lovely, and I learned a lot from him and from having done that. But certainly you're sitting here as I, trying to decide perhaps how your commitment and where your course of life will take you in public service. And obviously I had no idea that the course of events in history would thrust me into that unprecedented electoral maelstrom. Seriously, many people have asked me whether I regret the fame or infamy, depending on which side of the aisle you're sitting, that I received during my role, because of my role during the recount. And while the personal attacks, while they go with the territory, may have been difficult, following the law was very simple. And in sum, I review the recount and its aftermath as an overwhelmingly positive experience. First, our nation received a blessing in disguise, and previously the political will had never existed to reform our elections. Second, I believe that systemically these events transformed our nation forever. If you think about our children, by day they were with their teachers, and by night with their parents, listening to the recount issues. In truth, they heard about the value of one vote, and now they truly understand just what that means. I think it'll impact them for always. And last, the national exposure enabled me to advocate some of the issues that I had long been passionate about, long before I was ever Secretary of State, such as election reform, the arts, international affairs, and literacy. And you're probably not aware, based on the media coverage, that I actually have major responsibilities in these areas because of the media's actual misinformed descriptions of the position of Florida's Secretary of State, saying that it was inconsequential. I'd like them to say that any longer, but due to these erroneous statements that Florida will eliminate this office next year. Very recently, I counted over 5,000 stories on the internet of printed news stories that misreported this information. In truth, in 1998, we had an amendment to the Constitution, which was passed, which merely transformed several independently elected offices of the cabinet. We have a statewide cabinet elected office, 6 officers, and it transformed 3 of these, the Secretary of State, the Commissioner of Insurance, and the Commissioner of Education, into either appointed offices or offices merged with others. In fact, we have the most expansive duties of any Secretary of State in the United States. I share executive power with the governor. He does not choose his cabinet. We are elected statewide. With 5 other elected officials in the cabinet that exercise authorities over such issues as clemency, perhaps the most difficult issue that we face, education, the environment, sovereign submerged lands, very important issues in terms of the state governance. And I also preside over 7 divisions as Secretary of State. I have the Division of Corporations, and we oversee corporations. We have more corporate licensing than any other state in the union, in some cases the entire regions of the country. As I also oversee licensing, and in that licensing, it includes concealed weapon permits, but also security officers. And right now, they're fulfilling a vital role at a time when security is so key that there's actually twice as many security officers as there are state law enforcement officers. So we have these detailed at armories and other locations, so the taxpayer isn't paying up that tab, but definitely ensuring the security of our state. I oversee the state's historic resources, and now we're #1 in the country in terms of funding historic preservation. And we've found it's a very important economic stimulus, as well as cultural affairs, which I also have oversight for, because we've found that when our visitors come, either domestically or internationally, and this is valid in every one of your countries and each one of your states, that they will spend 20% more visiting a cultural site, a heritage event, and certainly our ecological resources. They'll spend 20% and stay longer. So it's a vital economic development tool at this moment when people are returning back to what matters most. We have record attendance at museums, and it's very important that we continue the funding for those issues, which we think are vital. Also, we found in the Division of Cultural Affairs that whenever you incorporate arts into the educational curriculum, it will raise SAT points, 68 points verbally and 32 points in math. And not only does it teach children to think differently, rationally, spatially, certainly some of the reasoning aspects, also we found that it really assists with children at risk. For example, in Tallahassee, we have something called the Tallahassee Boys Choir. There's 120 men who have the choice, young men from very young to seniors in high school. They basically have the choice, according to a judge, of singing in the boys' choir, maybe be detained at some facility. There are children at risk. But today, it's really extraordinary what's happened in their lives. They are mentored. They must maintain a B average. They learn math through music and dance, and they've just returned because the Pope invited them to sing at the Vatican, and they were honored at the White House with the highest honor arts in terms of the arts. So you can imagine how these young men's lives will never be the same, and that's the impact that the arts can have. Further, I also have oversight over all the libraries, and we're very proud of this because we've instituted literacy courses in our libraries. We give grants out so that these courses can be designed to fit every region of Florida, which is vastly different across the state. We don't want to leave anyone behind as we are growing economically and globally, and we're very pleased with this program, and so much so that we just received a $10 million grant from the Gates Foundation so that every single library throughout our state can be equipped with computers and the internet for distance learning, and also so that particularly in the rural and underserved areas. So it's an exciting and very vastly different, divergent type of office as Secretary of State, and I enjoy it very much. But perhaps the two issues I want to concentrate the most on are my international affairs, which I'll discuss with you in a moment, and of course that smaller division called elections. Hence the title of this discussion tonight, Beyond Ballots, Florida's Agenda at Home and Abroad. And I wish to share with you how Florida has aggressively moved beyond the searing events of the 2000 presidential election to embrace the progressive measures in such diverse areas as both election reform and international affairs. But before I do so, I would like to briefly address some of the decisions that I made during the recount, which I'm sure you have an interest, and which remain the subject of intense feelings among partisans on both sides. While we each had our own preferences, and certainly I did in the presidential election, my decisions reflected my determination to follow the law, regardless of the consequences. My decisions have unfairly sometimes received a partisan label, despite the fact that a close examination of...
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we have a disturbance up in the upper gallery, and we're not going to permit that disturbance to take place. We're going to listen to the Secretary of State. If you don't desire to listen, you may go outside.
Certainly, thank you. At any rate, I wanted to explain some of those decisions, and specifically as they related to the categorization that I had acted only in terms of a decision that would have put President Bush in a better light in terms of favoring him. That none of my decisions specifically did that, and I'd like to engage you in this discussion. Despite all the scrutiny of the recount, the media still refuses to report those actions that we actually exercise. For example, the first week after Election Day, I asked the Florida Supreme Court to bring speed and order to proliferating how about that, litigation by consolidating all those pending cases in the same venue in the state capitol. In the same motion, I asked the Supreme Court to issue uniform standards for recounts. Further, I insisted on certifying the election in compliance with the statutory timetable, actually what was mandated by law, so that former Vice President Gore could proceed with his contest of the election as quickly as possible. The contest could not legally begin until certification. We had two periods post-election. One was the pre-certification or the protest, and the post-certification or the contest. Two specific periods that you have to understand the law. The contest, that means after certification, was the only route under Florida law for Mr. Gore to achieve his stated goal of a fair statewide recount, as only a court could order such a recount. I had no power to do so. So by challenging my decision to certify according to the law, the Florida Supreme Court unnecessarily extended the protest phase at the beginning, and shortened the contest phase. Meanwhile, it constricted Mr. Gore's time to pursue a contest to such a great extent that no time remained to formulate a constitutional uniform recount standard when the United States Supreme Court issued its December 12th decision. In other words, had the Gore campaign allowed me to certify the election on time, his contest could have begun 8 days earlier, potentially enabling the completion of a statewide recount that complied with the United States order. Even the Gore's campaign's Florida-based attorney, Dexter Douglas, advised that Mr. Gore's best option under Florida law was to accept my decision to certify the election on time so as to permit a longer contest period. Despite the difficulties we encountered during the recount period, the dire predilections of a threat to our democracy deeply underestimated the rule of law and the character and resilience of the American people. We experienced no constitutional crisis. We simply had a close race. I took solace in the wisdom of Edmund Burke, who said, "He who wrestles with us strengthens our nerves and sharpens our skills. Our antagonist is our helper." As one who has been widely helped, I can attest to his prescience. But Florida's difficulties and experience of Election 2000 exposed flaws in the electoral process that had festered across America for decades. Until this time, the political will had never existed to address these concerns. Many people said that after the recount that I would probably receive an ambassadorship. I said that I would probably get an ambassadorship to Chad, with all due respect to anyone who's from that country, but the press ran with that, never quite gave me the credit for that comment. But I also stated at the time that I would neither seek nor accept an appointment after the recount, and that I would seek elected office and let the people decide. But when the recount period ended, I made election reform my #1 priority, although we were accused across the board of merely giving lip service to this issue. When we presented the bill to the United States Congress, both Republicans and Democrats praised our efforts. And in fact, in a remarkable show of bipartisan effort, the Florida legislature passed virtually every aspect of my bill as a part of a landmark election reform act that has garnered national acclaim. Further, to this day, Florida is the only state in the nation that has completely reformed its elections and paid for it. We are no longer the national concern. We're now the national model. Professor Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia said that what Florida is doing is leading the nation. Our reforms are grounded upon 2 bedrock principles. First was that we must restore the confidence of the voters in the state, and second, that we would comply with the United States Supreme Court ruling. Because of our reforms, never again will Floridians ever suffer the vicissitudes of hanging, dangling, or impregnated chads. Never again will we have the punch card. Second, never again will someone who is qualified to vote be turned away at the polls. And very importantly, never ever again will our men and women in uniform who put their lives on the line for our freedom every day abroad endure the indignity of challenges to their right to vote at home. But we're not resting on our laurels. Based on findings from a task force that I formed last summer, we're determined to achieve the passage this session of the first legislation in American history that forcefully seeks to include persons with disabilities as full and equal participants in the elections. Edmund Burke was right. Elections 2000 strengthened and sharpened our democracy, preparing us for the challenges that we face today. And I hope that you'll encourage all of your elected leaders to join Florida in revitalizing the greatest access we have to democracy through free and fair elections. But Florida's national leadership extends far beyond the borders of election reform. At this time of instability and uncertainty on the world stage, and all nations face a new paradigm into which traditional assumptions about international economy and global security simply do not fit. Opponents of trade liberalization have often based their opposition on the notion that nations can operate as islands unto themselves. Persons taking this stance have viewed cultural and economic engagement in the world as optional. As the tragedy of September 11th attacks proved, however, no nation can guarantee its security without helping to build global prosperity and understanding through trade and cultural exchange. By virtue of Florida's central location geographically and our cultural diversity, we're uniquely positioned to play a vital role in this effort. First, by leading the nations of the Western Hemisphere in initiatives that stress cooperation, and second, by serving as the central springboard for the remaining nations of the globe with our neighbors to the south. Beyond the astonishing blends of cultures that have taken place in South Florida, in Miami-Dade County alone, there are 143 languages and dialects spoken. Florida's integration with the hemisphere has taken many specific forms, and in particular, the Florida Department of State, through our Office of International Affairs, have developed a wide variety of programs that employ cultural, diplomatic, humanitarian, and educational tools to produce international understanding, prosperity, and stability. As the fourth most populous state in the United States, Florida has compiled an impressive economic record as its gross state product exceeds $450 billion. If it were classified as an independent nation, Florida would be ranked 16th in the world. When I was chairman of Commerce and Economic Opportunities in the Senate, we focused domestically. At the time, we were ranked 42nd in the nation as a state to start a new business or grow an existing business. But as long as we protected the consumer and the environment, the Senate President allowed us to listen to the people and work hard on these domestic agenda to grow business. And within 2 years, we went from 42nd to #1 in the nation. We've tried to apply that same strategy to the international arena. When I first became Secretary of State, or first was elected to the Senate, Florida was ranked behind Ohio, Oregon, and Washington State in international trade. And today, Florida is the #1 trading partner of every single nation in Latin America and the Caribbean, with the exception of Mexico. So we've continued to push forward in that, and in fact, in the last decade, the aggregate of Florida's imports and exports has more than doubled, growing from 32 billion to almost 74 billion. The United States Department of Commerce said that $42 billion increase, each $1 billion supports 20,000 new jobs, higher paying jobs, and these businesses also experience faster growth and are much more productive. More than 700 companies from 53 nations are now investing in Florida, creating over 240,000 jobs. So while Florida continues to enhance its traditional industries such as tourism and agribusiness, international trade has assumed a central role in our economic strategy. It's precisely this diversification that enabled Florida's economy to survive during the economic leveling prior to 9/11, as well as to the recession after that tragic day. Many nations have discovered Florida's pivotal role as an economic, intellectual, and cultural crossroads of the Western Hemisphere. This is perhaps one of our key comparative advantages. The size of Florida's consular corps is now second only to the United Nations and our nation's capital. International banks have transformed South Florida into a financial center for the Americas. We enjoy an increasingly stronger comparative advantage as Florida becomes the neutral intermediary between North and South in this hemisphere. I'm going to focus mostly on this hemisphere, although we have programs that extend globally. We recently completed our term as host of the negotiations for the Free Trade Area of the Americas, or ALCA, as is known throughout the Southern Cone. We're aggressively lobbying for the location of that FTAA permanent secretariat in Florida when it is scheduled for completion in 2005. The permanent secretariat would transform Florida into the nerve center of a 34-free nation, about a combined GDP of over $15 trillion with 800 million consumers. We've taken Florida's case of the Secretariat to Washington and have passed a unanimous consent from both houses of Congress stating their support for Florida's site as that Secretariat. The Florida Department of State created a not-for-profit organization, Florida FTAA, Inc., to develop funding for the Secretariat's location and to encourage the hemispheric-wide consensus. We recently sponsored the U.S.-Chile trade negotiations in Miami in December. This sponsorship constitutes part of our campaign to identify Florida with free trade and at the highest levels to showcase Miami as the ideal site for the FTA. Our efforts in connection with the FTAA do not constitute our only international initiative. The Florida Department of State also manages our state's participation in the Gulf of Mexico States Accord. The launch of the Gulf of Mexico States Accord occurred in May 1995 when governors from 11 border states of the Gulf of Mexico, 6 from Mexico, 5 from the United States, signed this innovative cooperative agreement in Campeche. In 1999, I negotiated the location of that secretariat to be in Tampa, Florida, and last week I assumed the presidency of that accord. It is actually, those 11 border states would constitute the 4th to 5th largest economy in the world. Since the founding of that accord, and in particular since the location in Tampa of the Secretariat, many strides have been made towards unifying the Gulf region through enhancement of investment, trade, and tourism, as well as through the promotion of academic, cultural, and technical exchanges among the member states. We've just completed an environmental survey of the Gulf so that we can secure and understand its ecological resources prior to any drilling that might occur. We've also moved the location of autos that used to travel throughout Texas, taking about 45 days now through the port of Tampa, which has brought it down to about 25 days. The accord also facilitates the participation of businesses and projects for Florida and Central America, and we're working in tandem with Mexican businesses, an approach favored by Mexican President Borks and welcomed by Central American leadership. Right now, Florida trades more with Brazil than all of China, Russia, and India combined, and we trade twice as much with Central America as we do Brazil. Further, the Department of State administers Florida's, it's called FAVACA, it's the International Volunteer Corps. It's really our own version of our Peace Corps. And through 1,500 professional volunteers with their specialized skills, Florida provides free technical assistance and job skill training throughout the Caribbean Basin and improves social and economic conditions. These volunteers have helped improve agricultural yields, develop industry, and establish healthcare systems throughout our region. So through these programs and some 30 additional innovative international initiatives through Asia, Africa, and the EU as well, Florida is determined to stimulate new thought, new solutions, and new opportunities for leadership in the community of nations. Because of our hard work of the Florida Department of State, in concert with many other leaders in business, government, and certainly in academia, Florida has truly begun its ascent to the summit of its potential as an international gateway to the world. Like our democracy itself, Florida has emerged from the unforgiving glare of the international spotlight that Election 2000 thrust upon us, with a powerful determination to lead at home and abroad. So despite the challenges that my oath of office created, I feel honored to have had the opportunity to play a role in these efforts. So I thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. It's wonderful to return to such a noble institution of learning. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Good. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start right here. We've got this mic. Do we have a mic upstairs? Yeah. We have this mic. We have a mic upstairs. We have a mic here and a mic here. So we're going to start right here. Now, please state your name and only one question. Thank you. No speeches. Thank you.
No speech, Senator. Good afternoon, Secretary Harris. My name is Darrell Thompson. I'm a mid-career here at the Kennedy School, so I welcome you back on behalf of the mid-careers. I also commend you for your effort since November 2000. But my question is this, and I know I'm speaking for many folks that felt disenfranchised in 2000. How do you respond to claims that the new district that you're considering running for in Florida, while it's not Chad, was redrawn as a political reward for you for your role in the election? Moreover, if, in fact, Secretary of State John Ashcroft can recuse himself, I'm there, Senator, can recuse himself in the Enron proceedings, why did not you and so many other officials who actively campaigned for President Bush or Vice President Gore not recuse yourself in the election dispute?
Great, thank you. As for the question for any district being drawn for me, the designations are not complete. And in fact, my district after it's drawn, all indications are that it will be less Republican than it was before. However, where I live in Southwest Florida, that is traditionally a stronghold for Republicans. So there's been no seat that's been drawn for me, and I'll have any number of choices of which seats I would like to run. Your second question, why did I not recuse myself? I think is a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. In Florida, we have a tradition because, unlike Senator Ashcroft in his new position, we are elected, and we are elected statewide as a cabinet. We're not appointed. I know many accounts said that I was appointed by the governor. I'm not. I'm not the governor's secretary. I get that all the time. When I ask children, what do I do? They think I answer his phones. That's not correct. But because we have a tradition in Florida that because we're elected, the cabinet officers usually assume a role of chairman of a presidential campaign. My predecessor was chairman of the Phil Graham's campaign. The Attorney General is actually the head of the Democratic Party, was running that campaign for Al Gore. And I actually was a little concerned when I was first asked. I was honored to be asked to be one of 8 honorary co-chairs. I had no specific responsibilities. I didn't even get to run anything, but they used my name. But you know, I did have concerns because I was chief elections officer, but again, there is nothing I could do to affect those returns. That is a strictly ministerial issue, and because of our long-standing effort, our long-standing tradition of chairing those campaigns at the statewide elected officials on the national realm, that's why I accepted that early on, and there was no reason to recuse myself.
Go right up here to the bell.
I know you can't see me very well. I'm Karen Lehman. I'm a mid-career from Minnesota. And I'm curious, I know that you have a real commitment to trade, especially in the Americas, and you also have a tough political problem in Florida with the Cuban Americans who want to continue the embargo with Cuba. And I'm interested in your personal views about the Cuban embargo, especially with the commitment to trade as a way of developing other societies and spreading the kinds of values and economic reforms that you're interested in.
It's a great question. Having just returned from Mexico and focusing on those 11 states, and if you were to look at the Gulf of Mexico, it truly is the Mediterranean, if you will, of the Western Hemisphere, and Cuba completes that. But we've taken a position that until there are free elections and human rights observations there that we believe are so foundational, that's why they have been not been participants in the free trade area of the Americas, and that's why we haven't opened up those free trade options for them.
Right here, sir.
Hi there. I'm Benjamin Bolger from the state of Michigan. And in your speech, you made it very clear that you are working and you have worked on reforms to the election process. But at the same point, I imagine there are a number of people, particularly young people in the state, that still have the impression that voting is less relevant to them today because of the controversy. And what I would like to know is what strategy do you still have and what strategy are you pursuing to help make the process or the perception of the process more fair and relevant to these various categories of people?
Good question. The National Association of Secretaries of State has a number of exciting opportunities that they hope that will be able to reach young people who are coming to the level of vote. I think that the idea of all the reforms that we've put forward, eliminating the punch card, making certain that votes are tabulated at the precinct level. Now, what that means, what happened in Florida's recount and in others, when votes are tabulated at the county level, if you put your ballot in and you overvote an election, or if you don't vote at all, then your votes are taken, and then those votes are disqualified if there's an overvote. What's going to happen, which is much more expensive in Florida, those votes will be tabulated at each precinct, and should you place your ballot in the machine, it will send it back to you if you have overvoted in an election or if you haven't voted at all in an election. And you'll have to override that if that's the way you want to vote. I mean, there are a number of precautions that we've taken, but what is very interesting, and you'll find ironic, Florida's systems of elections, our voting systems, were known to be, the certification to bring them online in each county, were among the most strident in the nation. What actually occurs that many people in the media did not understand because it's unique in each state, our 67 supervisors of elections are elected in each county. They are constitutional officers, and they have the right to determine how the ballot will be designed, as well as the equipment. Now, in order to make certain, from a Department of State standpoint, since I have no authority to override that, there's a certification process for voting systems that says that voting systems can only make one mechanical error per 1 million votes. So with 6 million voters, technically we had 6 mechanical errors. And so what Florida has done is really kind of getting the truth out with the national media descending. There were so many urban myths and so many media legends that have been established that are just completely false. So by debunking many of those and telling the truth, I think we have a chance to engage the young people again.
Hi, my name is Michael Borks, and I was born in St. Augustine, Florida. So
Great.
I was born in Florida, and I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida.
Great.
I transplanted here to go to school here, but at Boston University. Anyway, I have one question with 2 segments to it. Do you really think the average American is so unintelligent as to believe there was no fraudulent dealings in the election of George Bush in Florida, with Jeb Bush, his brother, being the governor of Florida, no conflict of interest? How do you feel now that you helped put a man in the presidency who is now waging a bloody war in Afghanistan, where Bush and his military have killed 4,000 Afghan civilians by one estimate?
Okay.
Just one question.
Which one? No.
It's your
Okay, no, the fraud aspect. To date, there's been no fraud. Even the Civil Rights Commission, which the press called a kangaroo court, they didn't uncover. There were many media, these urban legends I was talking about. You heard about blockades, police blockades. When we conducted a thorough investigation statewide, we found that there had actually been one blockade, and the officer did not realize it was election day, and it was in a Caucasian neighborhood. There was not one person who came before the Civil Rights Commission that they could find that was actually turned away. And so the evidence of fraud in terms of a statewide effort has not been proven. That's another urban legend. Were there issues that we needed to address in terms of concerns nationwide and that existed in Florida? Absolutely. And we have, and we're going to continue to work very hard on that. As for my role or the governor's role in the recount, I'm in charge of elections. I've stated before the commission I take full responsibility. That was not the governor's responsibility. He cannot assume any blame there. Whatever blame is, of course, focused on me. I've been told I'm the national punching bag. But as for our efforts, we believe that we conducted the elections with integrity. And as for the president who's now in office, truly, when I'm in Washington and I run into people who were commissioned to destroy my credibility in Florida, if you will, with the media, they even say they're really glad that our president is there. And so I'm very grateful that the president of the United States is there in the United States.
Hello, Secretary Harris.
Hello.
My name is Veronica Whistle, and I'm a junior at the undergraduate college. And I was just wondering if you could speak very briefly on the challenges that you've faced being a Republican woman thrust into such a high-profile decision-making position this year, and how you've dealt with that challenge.
As I said earlier, the personal attacks were kind of tough. I know that some of that goes with the territory. I do remember, I think I had not a breaking point, but a point in time where I really sort of became all right with all of that attention and kind of the vicious attacks, particularly by women, I might add, in the media. And that was one night, it was Christmas, and at the time I had received death threats, and so I had law enforcement with me. And so I couldn't really go anywhere and do very much. And so our home became over-decorated. I had nothing to do. I couldn't sleep. So from 2 to 6 every night, I was decorating the house. And I ran out of decorations one night. And so we went to Target. That was the only place that was open. And I had all these decorations, and there was this long line, and I got up to the cashier, and I'm really not accustomed to being recognized, and still am not. I mean, it happens, of course, but it's always a little daunting. And she looked at me, and then she looked at my credit card, and she looked back at me, and she goes, "Are you the Catherine Harris?" And I said, yes, I am, but I only have on one layer of makeup, and I'm incognito tonight. And the whole crowd just sort of lost it, and something just sort of broke from there. And it's like, if I heard once that if they don't have the facts, if you don't have the facts to attack someone, and then attack them, attack their person. And so I put it in that context, and it's a day at a time. I think what made a great difference, bit of difference for me was that I had incredible staff that I trust their integrity. We put up a firewall so that we knew we would follow the law. We hired a Democrat law firm that were constitutional experts, so I wouldn't be getting, directed in one way or another. And most importantly, I think the way that I dealt with it best is about the first 2 days after the election, when everything was chaos and madness and no one would make a decision, and all my friends were saying, punt to the Supreme Court, because this is a no-win situation. No matter what you do, you'll be accused of wrongdoings. This is the end of your political career. I asked my husband what I should do, and he just became a citizen 6 months before that. Thank goodness we needed his vote, but he said, "Oh, that's simple." And I just looked at him, "Simple? You just became a citizen. How do you know?" He said, "It's really simple. You just have to act with integrity, because you have to live with yourself the rest of your life. And you have to protect your staff." And so I would say that he was the real rock in the election, and I'm immensely grateful that I had such outstanding staff and friends, family, and faith. That was how I dealt with it.
Secretary Harris, thank you for being here. I'm Barry Heighton, and I'm a first year across the river at the business school. I was wondering what you might say to Americans who were considering public service, community service, but after watching the way you were vilified for arguably doing your job, might question that. So how do we inspire people to go into public service after watching what happened to you?
Because I would hope, if anything, God willing, I'll be in Congress. I don't know, but I'm alive. I learned a lot, but in retrospect, I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me. I sleep well because I don't have any doubts or excuses. I know that I follow the law exactly. That was my only safe harbor. So I believe for anyone who wants to go into public office, I would hope first, you have to really do it for the right reasons. And if your character is solidified, that's going to appear when the pressure gets tough. It not only helps to cast it better, you have a decision every day how you will live, how you will work. But if somebody really cares about public service and they have that deep and abiding purpose, then they have to understand that there are a lot more important things than just, having people criticize your makeup or something as, inane as that, and you have to just do the right thing, and the future will take care of itself. I still believe public service is a noble calling. I still, while a few bad apples may spoil the bunch sometimes, apparently, there are extraordinary public servants on both sides of the aisle that fight very hard every day to make sure that America moves forward and the states or their representative government, city, county, have an opportunity to let the people's voice be heard and act on it. And so I encourage anyone who cares to serve in public office. I would still encourage them to do so. I still think it's a very important calling.
Good evening, Secretary Harris.
Good evening.
I'm Mary Zupkis, and I'm a mid-career student, and something you were not too long ago. And my question is, how did the Kennedy School and the coursework that you did here prepare you for the challenges that your career has brought about?
Great question. I'm only pausing because that could be an all-night dissertation. The Kennedy School meant so very much to me, certainly from negotiations and understanding how those things play out to all the international affairs. All the academia prepared me better than, it was a better preparation than anything I could ever imagine for this or any other contest in life. But I think singularly, the greatest preparation, or what meant the most, were the relationships here with professors and with students. And the kind of what I learned that, when I was growing up in our educational system, if you had a group project, that meant that I did all the work and everybody else got to share my grade. And however, here, it just turned everything upside down. The most extraordinary solutions I would find came from the people that I expected would have most unlikely to contribute in that regard. You learned a sense of community and purpose that I'll never forget, and you learn to cooperate. You learn to work together with differing views to come up with a solution, and there's so many things that I learned, but this is one of the singular most valuable experiences that I've ever had, and I'll always be immensely grateful for the opportunity to have studied here.
Yes, sir.
Hello, thank you for speaking today. My name is Darian Unger. I'm a graduate student at MIT and from Orange County, Florida.
Okay.
It's been a long year now since the inauguration of President Bush. The landscape in D.C. has changed. You're looking at a new job in Congress, potentially. The attacks in September. So in retrospect, looking back over this long year now, things could have been very different. President Clinton, and I'd like to kind of ask for a counter to President Clinton. He at one point said that if Al Gore had won, that probably he would have had much more trouble garnering Republican support in the wake of, for example, attacks, because they wouldn't rally to a controversially elected Democratic leader. So, what do you think? What might have happened if the guy with more votes had won?
Our country has laws that have to be followed as they were written, when they were written, and that's what we did. And part of that is an electoral college. And were it not for the electoral college, then presidential candidates can only go to urban centers, some 20 points on the map, and the rest of America would never have the opportunity for any interaction. So I support that venue. As far as what would happen, I haven't stopped to speculate. As I said earlier, I'm grateful that the president is George W. Bush right now. I think he has acted with extraordinary courage and vision and led this country well. So actually, I don't stop to think what if. I continue to try to look forward and say what might be. I couldn't tell you.
Let's see, where are we now? Yes, right here.
Hi, my name is Jane Newman, and the question I'm about to ask you might make you think that I'm an ex-felon who's thinking about moving to Florida. When an ex-felon moves to Florida from another state, according to Florida state law, they're supposed to be allowed to vote if they were allowed to vote in their former state. Why do these people still need to apply for clemency from the governor?
That's a good question. I'm not, are you certain that they do? I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with that absolute fine point. Well, in Florida law, we do require people apply for clemency. It's gotten much more streamlined than it was before. Certainly, if what we've done in other situations concerning voting or concealed weapon permits, there's reciprocity. So I would imagine it's a mere ministerial scenario, so that our books, our voting records, if they show a felony, that they'll also show clemency, because that's the way it's set up so that people have access to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have anyone here? Right over here, sir. Right here.
Hi, Secretary Harris. I'm Lucian Carter from the college. I'm a freshman. My question is that in the speech that you were planning to deliver in Orlando prior to the 2000 election, it was stated that you were planning to say, quote, "I'm a bit biased. I co-chair the campaign effort of George W. Bush. I hope it will be W." Do you feel that an elected official on any level should be permitted to publicly endorse a national candidate and possibly influence people on how they should vote?
Oh, actually, yes. I think if you're an elected official, you're entitled to an opinion just as anyone else. I imagine President Clinton endorsed Vice President Gore as well.
Thank you.
Right here, please. Thank you. Pardon.
it is sort of similar to the other question before, that in the last presidential election, over 1,000 people were denied the right to vote, and these voters were African American ex-convict. Is that because 9 out of 10 times they are more likely to vote for the Democratic candidate? Why does Florida continue to deny felons who have already fully paid their debt to society the right to vote in elections?
It's very simple. That's the law. That's our Constitution. And until we change the law, felons are not allowed to vote until they're granted clemency.
Good. Here we go right here, sir.
Hello, I'm Achilles Alor. I'm mid-career. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And, I'm not even American citizen, so this is not a partisan question. But I'm very, very curious. Who really, really had more votes in Florida?
According to our vote counts and according to the media, after they spent 1 year and millions of dollars, Bush.
My name is Esther Leibowitz, and although Senator Pryor was joking before, he's okay in my book. It isn't a joke what you did. It isn't a joke what you did. When you angered the nation by stimulating their thinking, because what you did with the blessing of the Supreme Court, the people, thank you, the people want change because the Constitution guarantees the right to vote. In 1970, Rexford T. Tugwell, Roosevelt Brain Trust, wanted to change the Constitution with the blessing of his advisor, Warren Burger, before he became a Chief Justice. But it didn't work. My question to you is, did you really, really learn from the mistake and the serious what you did? I was listening to all these questions, and the people are angry here. They're asking real angry questions. They're angry with you. Did you learn from your mistake?
I don't believe I made a mistake. I followed the law exactly as it was written.
I know.
So
well, you just gave me the answer.
Okay.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, I would follow the law again.
I know.
As it was written.
No.
Sorry, it's not the definition of is, it's the
not a joke. It's really
rule of law.
serious.
I think this probably right here should be our last and final question, and then we'll have any final comments from the Secretary.
This is a comment more than anything. Hello, I'm Rosa Brayboy. I was
Good evening.
97, mid-career. Is there anyone else here from class of 97 in this? No? Okay. I can attest to the Secretary's character. Catherine sat up here right on this top tier and studied night and day, day and night, all the time she was here. Secretary Harris, I'm a Republican also. And I want you to know that you did the right thing that day. I don't care what anyone says here, not because I'm a Republican, because you came into a broken system, okay? It was unfortunate that under your tenure, all the problems were discovered. And I would challenge everyone in this room to go back to their own states and correct the flaws in the electoral process in their state. I stand up for this woman. I think she survived under a lot of heat from a lot of men, women, Democrats, people who don't even vote, people who don't even know the process. I'm very proud of you, and good luck to you in the election. And
Thank you. Sincerely, I appreciate all your comments. I empathize with both sides. My only comment is that my only safe harbor was to follow the law, but I appreciate the opportunity to be back. This is an amazing place. You guys have an awesome opportunity for 6 more months to grow and learn and experience so much, and then take all of those relationships and take everything with you for the rest of your life and make a difference. That's the challenge that the Kennedy School really holds for you. You have a unique opportunity to learn and to grow and develop more than probably any other time in your life. And from the foundational educational aspects you garner here, you're going to take that, and that's going to determine the next steps you make. So it's very important that you spend your time here and absorb everything you can, and then, but don't just keep it. Make sure you return to your different lives and use it for good. Just like the Count of Monte Cristo, make sure you always use that extraordinary gift for good. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to mention to the Secretary of State, I just wanted to mention that thus far in the last few days we've had Michael Bechelos right here playing the LBJ tapes, which was wonderful educational, and I might say very, very amusing in some respects. Then we had the following night John Deutsch, the former director of the CIA, debating Ken Edelman, who was the arms negotiator under President Reagan, on whether Iraq is next or not. So that was a great and stimulating evening. And tonight has been a wonderful evening, and tomorrow night we are really going to have a fine evening, and because we're going to have the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Jane Swift. She'll be right here. We invite all of you to come back. We have a lot of wonderful events coming for you this semester. You're all welcome. We thank you again very, very much for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My name is Liz Buckley, and in a former life I lived in Washington and worked with a small production company that did a lot of things with AARP, and we just terribly in our office. Every time there was an opportunity to do something with you in your office and any kind of a meeting, it was
You're great.
Well, you were great.
Well,
it's
thank
great
you.
to see you.
Thank you.
And you did a lovely job.
Oh, no, thank you. We had a little bit of a problem. We were told, we were told in advance that we were going to...
I'm surprised there wasn't more, frankly.
Hey, I know it.